Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Maybe you heard about the woman who called a friend to say that she couldn't find her cell phone, only to realize she was talking on it. Or the one about the man who searched and searched for his glasses, only to find them perched on his head. Perhaps these stories, or stories like them, are more familiar to us than we'd like to admit. I know that the older I get, the more and more I resemble those remarks. This week we are looking at some stories about Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus expresses kindness and compassion. Please note that Jesus always expressed kindness and compassion, but there's something about these particular stories that draws special attention to this nature Jesus had, and which calls us to act in kindness and compassion too. Today we want to look at a story in Matthew 9, verses 35 and 36. Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Once again, let's set the stage. At this point in Matthew, Jesus is a whirlwind of activity. Already in this chapter, he has healed a paralyzed man that some friends let down through the roof to reach Jesus, and then took on some scoffing scribes and teachers of the law. Then Jesus called Matthew to follow him, and again dealt with those who complained that Jesus was hanging out with the wrong people, like that tax collector Matthew. Jesus said, "I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." Then the disciples had a question about fasting, and Jesus had to set them straight. And before you know it, a leader of the synagogue showed up saying his little daughter was dying, and would Jesus come and heal her? On the way, a woman with a hemorrhage touched the fringe of his garment and was healed. But in the delay of that healing, the little girl died. Nevertheless, Jesus continued with the leader of the synagogue and raised the little girl back to life. Then a man possessed by a demon shows up, and Jesus casts out the demon. That's when our verses pick up. After all this, Jesus sees the crowds teeming with people in need of healing and has compassion on them, because they are like sheep without a shepherd. Wow. If anyone has a right to feel harassed and harried here, we might think it was Jesus. I have a book on my shelf that simply walks through a day in the life of Jesus, and the title of the book is In the Eye of the Storm. But this is exactly where we see the kindness and compassion of Jesus. Jesus understands our struggles, our fears, and our worries. And in the midst of all that he had going on, Jesus reached into the even deeper well of God's kindness and compassion. We live in a busy world full of coming and going, and not knowing where our cell phone or our glasses are is just scratching the surface. We know all about being harassed and helpless. A short list: war looming in Ukraine, stock markets down, a nation divided, violence in society, racial strife, a pandemic of all things. And those are just some of the things affecting all of us, not to mention our own family worries, our personal financial stress, that difficult job situation, unhappy with this, dissatisfied with that lives we lead. We know all about being harassed and helpless. We know all about feeling like sheep without a shepherd. There and then, Jesus steps into our lives. There and then, we have a rock to cling to hold us steady in a billowing sea. We have a shelter in the storm. In love, Jesus reaches deep into the well of God's kindness and compassion and makes us whole and gives us peace. In our harassed and helpless world, the kindness of Jesus reaches to us. Know the peace that only God can give. And then live in kindness for others. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.